of Ed Siddell, EGSI Financial President and Chief Investment Officer. Ed, let me start with you, just in terms of, I guess, your takeaway from all the selling that we've seen over the last several months.
Well, it's really not surprising. As the economic data continues to come around, everything is trending to the negative side. We just saw the index for the leading economic indicator come out, and it was worse than expected. It was supposed to be minus zero point 0.5, and it wound up being -1 for November. And as that's a story by itself being that bad. However, one of the major variables for the LEI was the stock market, and as we know, that rallied in November. So it'll be interesting to see, what the LEI looks like for December going into 2023.
Ed, just thinking about recession probabilities for the new year, what camp are you in?
Honestly, I think we're going to be in a recession. I think it's going to be deep. I think it's going to be long, and a lot of it has to do with debt. I think it resembles a lot of what happened in 2008. Just the amount of debt that we have, because the Fed said that we hit an all-time high, 16.5 trillion in consumer debt. And part of that was we added 1.27 trillion in consumer debt just within the last 12 months. So I think it's going to get a little bit ugly before it gets better, but it's going to provide some really good opportunities.
Julian, what do you think? Do you agree?
So I think if I look at it, I can see us dipping into recession probably the end of Q1, beginning of Q2. As for the debt, I'm not sure it's clear yet. I mean, I think part of the problem, and this is work that we've done internally, really does depend on the stock market. The stock market has a huge correlation with the employment market. The Fed must weaken this employment market. So my concern is at some point, maybe in Q2, they step back a little bit and we find there's resilience in this equity market. It's not my base case, but you may. And if that's the case, then we're going to get this little pause and the economy will rebound sometime in the second half, but the Fed will end up going again and hiking again. And that's my biggest fear for next year. I mean, as I said, I think Q2, we probably move into recession, but as for the depths, I don't think it's clear yet.
Well then, Julian, how does this play out in the stock market? I know you're comparing the current market to the epic we had about 2 decades ago with the fallout from the dot-com boom. What does this portend?
So, look, I think we're in kind of, if you go back to the dot-com bubble, it was actually a rolling bear market. Right? We all think of the NASDAQ back in March of 2000. But the S&P held up for another 6 months till September, and the Dow didn't really go until May of 2001. I think we're in that kind of end of 2000 period where the money is rotating out of the S&P and into the super safety stocks that you can see. And I think these days that's akin to money coming out of the FANGs and going into some of these other sectors, these very safe sectors. And you can see it now. The US is breaking down. I mean, things like Apple are breaking down against the S&P, the broad US equity market is breaking down versus the rest of the world quite materially. And I think that could be the single Achilles heel of the US. We've lived off foreign inflows that have funded our current account deficit for the last decade plus. And if that money starts to go home, then the rotation into the rest of the world and the rotation into other sectors, most notably the one that we really love, precious metals, is going to be enormous. And this could take, we could see the US underperform for a decade.
Let's go back to the last thing that you said, because you said it was going to get uglier before it gets better, but that potentially does provide some opportunities. Where would those opportunities be in that scenario?
I think those opportunities are basically abroad. I really don't think they're in the US. You can get exposure in the US by certain sectors that are very heavily exposed to the overseas market. And as I said, I think in the commodity sector, I think this could be very much a period that we saw from sort of 2002 to 2008, a repeat of that time of period, as opposed to what we've got used to in the last decade, which was the only place to be in the world was the US, and the only place to be within the US was tech.
And what about you?
Yeah, I agree. Commodities, that's probably going to be the hidden gem. Precious metals, even agricultural. Energy is definitely going to play a big part in it. But, I agree as the devaluation of the dollar occurs, I think a lot of the good buys are going to be overseas and not in the U.S.
All right, we got to leave it there. But a big thanks to you both, and thanks for joining us on a Friday before New Year's. Enjoy that, by the way. All right, coming up next, Elon Musk's Twitter drama takes a